So yeah, hi everyone. So I'm from Christchurch. My name's Louis, and just before I start, what a privilege it is to be here in front of all of you. I've never been to Rotorua actually. This is my first time coming here, and it's such a nice place. I remember coming down from the plane, and I was just like, wow, it's like so green and so nice, and kind of such a different vibe from where I'm from, where it's all like kind of urban space, really. I'm a city boy, as you can tell, so it's really weird. Um, so that's me when I was younger. I'm not a girl. My mom decided to dress me up as a girl back when I was young, and as you can tell from my face, I didn't like it at all. I grew up in the Philippines, and I moved to Christchurch back in 2008. Another thing about me is that I'm soon to be graduating with a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry, and I only managing that after successfully turning a 3-year degree into a 5-year endeavor. So well done, me. And then, so Cultivate Waste, I started it while I was studying at university. I had a lot of privilege, especially with my background in community engagement, to have such an opportunity to test out running a social enterprise, start my own one, work on a lot of problems and try and solve it and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I'm not actually involved with that anymore. And that is part of the reason why I'm here, I suppose. I'm just going to tell my story of how I started it and kind of my learnings around it, and essentially why I left it as well. And some of you probably are wondering, why do I have Vodafone in my slides? It has to do with my current role at Vodafone. So I'm currently working as the coordinator for this startup program, which helps businesses and startups across New Zealand. Yeah. So when I talk about social enterprise and kind of my journey, I can't help but talk about the stuff that I did before that. So most of you will probably know that back in 2010 and 2011, we had earthquake in Christchurch, and that was a pretty tragic moment for everyone, really. So it had a lot of damage and stuff like that. But for me, as selfish as it sounds, it was actually a really good thing. It gave me an avenue to get out there, get involved with the community, meet people, hear the stories. And that was really, it was such a good spark that I fell in love with what I was doing, and I found myself just having a really big passion for community engagement. Oops, keep forgetting. And from volunteering, there's 3 things that I took away from that. The first one is basically, you learn and grow so much by volunteering. Most of the skills I have today that are still really useful when running a social enterprise or doing entrepreneurship are all because I did volunteering. And another thing is that you also grow your network while volunteering. So you meet a lot of people, and these very same individuals are usually the ones that you meet again later while doing entrepreneurship, as is my case for me. So most of them are currently my life coaches as well as my mentors, and they're all very excellent individuals when it comes to figuring out how to create a social environmental impact, but also how to run a business. The next one is that non-profits can actually be really fiscally and mentally draining. So I've been involved with various organizations who are all non-for-profits while I was studying at university, and it was a very challenging space. I loved what I did, but because I progressed through being a regular volunteer to actually managing some of them, it was just some challenges that were just, sometimes I felt like I don't want to do this anymore. And the reason being is that sometimes in a non-for-profit sector, there's no guarantees of what will happen in the future, especially the financial aspect of it. So a lot of non-for-profits rely on funding and grants from governments and councils and other bigger organizations, but it's not always a sure thing. Sometimes you get the dreaded answer, which is, no, you can't have any more money. And then the last bit is that opportunities come when you do what you love to do. I found that while I was volunteering, I attracted the very same kind of people as me, and I really enjoyed that. I formed a lot of my friendships while I was studying at uni through volunteering. We were all in the same crew. We go out every weekend, go out to a community, and did a lot of things, and that was really a good thing. And then another thing is that organizations tend to be offered a lot of opportunities, or even just individuals, when what they do in the community gets acknowledged. And for me, last year, I got the opportunity to go to Japan on a fully funded trip to work on disaster risk reduction that was hosted by the United Nations. And it was such a weird experience because I was just about to start university for that year in February. And then I got a call from my mate, Jason, who's one of my life coach, and he was like, hey, would you like to come to Japan? And I was like, oh, I'm really broke, like I'm just about to start uni. And he was like, oh, don't worry, like it's fully funded. I'm like, sure, how long do I have to prepare? It's like, oh, you've got a week to sort out visa and everything. I'm like, oh, right. So I pretty much like skipped uni for that whole week. Talked to a lot of my lecturers, like, hey, I'll be away for another 2 weeks, so sorry about that. And then sorted out everything, and then off I go to Japan, which was really cool. And it was such an amazing experience, and I learned so much from that. Met a lot of people who were so inspiring. And one of them was Auntie Helen. I never really met her before. When I moved to New Zealand, it was already John Kay. And yeah, and I just heard a lot of good things about her and how kind of inspirational and such a wonderful leader she is. And so what we did was we tweeted her throughout the whole event, asking, hey, we've got some Kiwi delegates here. We really want to talk with you. Are you free at any point of the day? Obviously, like, she's a really busy woman and she's everywhere. She has to meet a lot of people. But we got a reply on one of the days saying, yes, I've got a lunch period. Would you guys like to have lunch with me? And we're like, cool, yes, let's do that. And so suddenly we met at a point in a building, and then security came to pick us up, got escorted through a lot of, into a really secluded room where no one was kind of, like no press were able to come in, and we had lunch with her and were able to ask her questions directly like she's just any regular person, which was really cool. And coincidentally, one of the guys had pineapple lumps with him. So we gave Auntie Helen some pineapple lumps, and she was like, wow, this is so reminiscing. So that was cool. And then a few months after that, well, actually about a year ago today, about September last year, I got another opportunity to attend Festival for the Future. I got an email saying, hey, we can offer you a scholarship to attend if you're keen. And I didn't really know much about it then. So I kind of researched about it, and basically what it is a weekend-long event about celebrating what Kiwis do in New Zealand as well as worldwide. And they invite a lot of speakers from all over New Zealand, as well as the neighboring countries like the Pacific, Australia, and sometimes from the Americas and Europe. And that was really cool. And at one point during the weekend, I remember myself kind of listening to one of the speakers. Before that actually. So Festival for the Future is run by Inspiring Stories, and Inspiring Stories is a kind of national organization that supports a lot of young Kiwis. And it's run by Guy Ryan, who was the 2015 Young New Zealander of the Year. And his big vision in life is basically to unleash the potential of everyone in New Zealand, especially the young people, to create positive impact in their communities. And so during Festival for the Future, I was just I was so young, I was so naive, I was just listening to everyone, really attending different workshops. And I remember at one point during the weekend, I was listening to this girl. Her name's Bonnie Howland, and she had this really big vision in life. And what she does, not sure if still doing it, but basically what she does was is sell makeup products, mascara. I don't really know much about makeups, but I was just so inspired when she talked about her product, which was organic, ethical, made in a package and made in a way that's safe for the environment and not damaging anything along the process. But she just didn't stop there. What she actually did was partner with another foundation called Fred Hollis, which was treating treatable blindness. And so she's partnered with them, directing all her profits towards the organization to help fund treatable blindness in the Pacific. And I was just standing there, and I was like mind blown. I was basically looking like this. And I was like, whoa, like someone 18-year-old doing all of that. And I was like, so last year I was 23, and I was just like, what am I doing in my life? Like, like she's 18 and she can do all this. Like, what have I been doing? And so I was just standing there looking so amazed and just so mind blown by what she was doing. And I thought to myself, wow, this is cool. Maybe this is something I could do. Maybe this is something that I need. Because last year, while I was studying as well, it was kind of my last full year of study. I finished in June this year. A lot of people were starting to ask me, what are you going to do after you graduate? And with my field of study in chemistry, there's one thing I'm sure of, is that there's no jobs outside of study after undergraduate. And I was like, yeah, what am I doing? I haven't really figured that out. And I wasn't really keen on doing postgraduate studies because I didn't want to turn a 2-year master's into a 5-year master's, as I've done with my undergrad. So I thought, oh, maybe I can do social enterprise. So after Festival of the Future, I went back to Christchurch, and I did what I do best, which is volunteer. But as well as volunteering, I was also kind of trying to research more about social entrepreneurship. And it just so happened that a few weeks after Festival for the Future, this happened in Christchurch, Unreasonable Labs, which is a 5-day program for startups that already has a product or a service. And through the 5-day period, they take them through, mentor them, have them workshops and stuff like that. And then by the end of the 5-day period, have something that is ready to be launched into the market to test out. And so I volunteered as a social media intern for that program, but I wasn't really doing much of social media. I was more interested in just listening to the workshops for free. So I took all the chances that I could learn about social entrepreneurship. And then a few months after that, I then had this wonderful opportunity to apply for Live the Dream, which is another program hosted by Inspiring Stories. It's a 10-week program over the summer that allows Kiwis aged 18 to 30 to start their own social enterprise and solve some of the most wicked problems in the world, really. And I was so privileged to be part of that program. So I was so excited when I got the email saying, hey, we've got a spot for you. Are you keen to take it? I said, hell yeah, I'll take it. It's for free, and then I've got plans for summer, so I'm not a loser anymore. A lot of my friends were traveling, and I was just I don't have plans yet. So that was it. That was my summer. I did it. And that's basically how and through that program, I was able to start Cultivate Waste. So the problem that I wanted to solve with Cultivate Waste was basically food wastage. While studying at uni, I was working part-time as well, as part-time in the hospitality sector. And a lot of the times, I was mainly in the kitchen. I started from a dish hand right through being a trainee chef. And every time I work and every place that I've worked at, it's always been the same. There's always a lot of food that's being thrown straight into the rubbish. And I was just wondering, especially with my different background, where we always we put such a high value in food. And I remember when I was young, if I did eat something on my plate, I would go straight to a room, and Mom would just beat the shit out of me. And having that kind of thought in my head, and I was like, why do Kiwis don't value food? What is wrong with food? It's perfectly fine. Why are we just throwing it straight into rubbish? Why can we not give it to, the less privileged people? And I've asked the questions to my managers, and most of their answers were, actually, we can't because we don't like to be sued. But then I researched more about it, and actually, that's not a real thing. No one gets sued, really. It's just like, that's a false belief. And I was also thinking, like, surely the people who you're gonna give the food to has better immune systems than anyone in the planet, right? Like, most of them have probably eaten something worse than perfectly fine food. And so I was like, I want to do something about this. I'm getting really angry about this whole process. And so I researched more about it, and what I found was actually even more shocking. Last year, from 2014 to 2015, we wasted about $870 million through food wastage. So that's how much we threw as a country. And that's a lot of money. And I was like, we've got a lot of problems. Like last year, we just spent $30 million on changing the flag. And I was like, such a weird system that we have. So I work around that problem, and then I took it back to my city. I compounded the issue back in Christchurch. And in our CBD, there's actually no green waste collection that's provided for free by the council. So a lot of the restaurants just threw the rubbish straight into the red bin and straight into landfills. And then I was like, maybe I can start small and work in this area and do something around that. So what we did was provide a food waste collection service to hospitality outlets. We started with restaurants and cafes and eventually moved to office spaces. So we've got a little setup using an electric bike and a bike trailer. And we also retrofitted some bins to make sure they are airtight and sealed. So we went around the city collecting food waste, providing them with bins. And that was quite cool. I really enjoyed riding around my bike and kind of just going down the streets, and then people would look at me like, look, he's crazy, he's carrying bins around. And then I was like, I don't really care, I'm doing something good. I know I'm enjoying this. I'm changing something in the community. Just read through my notes. And then what we did to the food waste was basically take it back to the farm that I was working with. So I was working with Cultivate Christchurch, which is an urban farm in Christchurch, which they provide a lot of opportunities for kids who are kind of out of the mainstream. So a lot of kids who were referred to by schools because they've been reported with a bad behavior, or kids who dropped out of school because there were no opportunities for them. So they help those kids to kind of train them with skills through farming. And so I partner with them to divert, to offer them the food waste that I collected, and essentially we turned it back into compost, which is then used to grow more food. And the food we grew was then being sold back to the local businesses that we were servicing. So essentially we were creating a system that was making consumers and the growers work closely together. And it was really cool because every time I told the story, everyone was just like, whoa, that is so cool, like you're almost making a regenerative community. And kind of that was like, oh yeah, I am. But really all I was doing was collecting waste. And I was like, interesting how people perceive something you do, and very differently depending on how you phrase, how you say it. And so each week we were able to, by the time I left, we were diverting at least 700 kgs of food waste each week. And the impact we were making was really, I was really proud of it, because for a thing that I only started a few months back, to be able to divert that much amount of food waste was just kind of huge for me. I didn't think I could manage to do that. But, But what was even more important is the fact that as a social enterprise model, we also had to think about how are we actually going to cover the cost of doing this, how are we going to sustain ourselves in the future without relying too much on funding and grants. So we had a business model which looked like this. We pretty much charged for the bins that we were supplying to the customers, depending on the type of customer you are, whether you're a restaurant, a cafe, or an office space. We had different price ranges, and we charged per bin. So it started with $25 for one bin, and $10 additional for an extra bin. But what was even more interesting is that we didn't tie them to any contract. So at any time they could leave, and basically all our guarantee was that we will do it better than any other private companies you will ever sign up to. So a lot of the private companies usually tie the customers to a year-long contracts, and usually this frustrates a lot of customers because the service just goes down really quickly because they think that they don't have to do much at all because you're already tied up to a contract anyway, and if you leave, you're going to pay us. So we did that really differently, and all we had was we relied on our reputation to do the service better than anyone. And this price is actually, it's really high compared to what private companies offer. I managed to steal an invoice from one of my customers from a private company. Mm-hmm. And when we compared the pricing, it was only, their pricing was only around $8 for a much bigger bin. I think 420 liters, 420 liters. R1 is only 120. So.
Were those other services also composting the waste, or were they just?
Yeah, so that's another issue. There's no traceability with those private companies. So yes, you might be doing something good for yourself, but you can't really figure out where it's going. So that was another story that we were trying to sell to the customers. But we didn't figure that out right at the beginning. We were just like, oh yeah, let's just do this. And that was one of the learnings that we had, that we should include that because these private companies don't do it. So yeah, so like $25 is such a premium price compared to $8 for a much bigger bin. And at first we were quite hesitant. Are we actually going to sell something at this price point or not? Luckily for us, there were customers who were considered early adopters, and they were very excited to learn about the service that we provided. They didn't really care about the price. They just wanted to do the right thing. So that's good validation. And so by the time I left, we had 9 customers. I grew it from, when I took over the project, it was only 2, and then we grew it from 9. And all of them it's a mix of restaurants and cafes as well as shared office spaces. And this is something that we did for them, which is kind of an online marketing, which we helped their brand be recognized through the good thing that they've done by us enabling for them to do it. So that's pretty much my story of Cultivate Waste. And so what I want to talk now is basically just kind of my learnings from since I started about a year ago to until now. I think the first one is that be an expert of your own problem. As that image shows, like no one really, you can't really tell who's an expert or not on face value. And so just be confident. Research a lot about it. Be the expert of your topic. If I talked about food waste right now, you guys probably, some of you might know it, but some of you won't. But the good thing is that looking at you guys now, I can't really tell who's knowledgeable and who's not. And it's probably the same thing as me. You guys look at me and is he actually saying the true things or not? And basically just be really confident and back yourself up. If you're not going to be an expert, who will, right? And the next one is always test your ideas, validate it. No one's going to buy your product unless you test it right. And by testing, I mean, don't just ask your mom or your relatives or your friends. Actually talk to the people who's having the problems. When I started Cultivate Waste, I wasn't sure. So my problem was food wastage and how much we're throwing, how much food we're throwing in the bin. But then when I talked to the cafes and restaurants, it wasn't the same problem as them. They were very happy to not divert the waste because the food that they were throwing were already accounted for in their costings, and it was being the money was being covered by the amount that they charged in their menus. So it wasn't really a problem for them to throw the food away. It was, in fact, it was more of a nuisance to divert the food waste because it's adding time to the staff that has to deal with it. And so that was such a huge learning for me to kind of oh yeah, it's a problem for me, but not for them. How should I spin it in a way that it will be a problem for them? So I asked a lot of people from the hospitality sector, right from the business owners to the kitchen hands that is most likely to handle the food waste after each shift. And you also have to remember, it's not all about you. It's about your customers. I've seen it plenty of times since I've started entrepreneurship, where the CEOs and the founders always put the spotlight on them. Like they always go in front of the TV or in the media, and just talks about how much good they're doing and stuff like that. It doesn't really help you much when you reverse. Instead of doing it that way, and if you put the spotlight on your customers, that's even better, because the customers will appreciate you more and will probably recommend you to more customers that could potentially acquire your service. So what I did for Cultivate Waste was basically, instead of me going straight to media, why don't I talk about the customers I have and how amazing the stuff that they do by, like diverting their food waste, using it to compost, growing more food out of it, and buying the produce that we grew. And that was actually a really good thing. And I remember one of my customers sending me an email like, "Hey, thank you for what you did. I didn't really expect that by signing up to you. I had a lot of customers come in, talk about it, and I didn't even know about it. I just found out through my customers." And I was like, "Oh, wow, I've actually increased the amount of customers that comes into your establishment just by doing that really simple thing." And so, like, keeping your customers happy is so important. And the next thing is, don't be afraid to ask for help. A lot of founders, I think it's just a natural instinct for individuals to be really reclusive and not open up to people. I think there's a really bad kind of, I don't know how to say it, but it's like when you ask for help, people perceive you immediately as a weak person, but actually that's just yourself thinking about that. Like a lot of people who, when you approach them for help, they're actually really glad that you did, because that shows that shows about your character, that you accept that you have limitations, and you're willing to kind of open up in order for your product or service to grow further. When I did Cultivate Waste, I soon realized that even though I had the skills that I've gained through volunteering, I was doing a lot of things very inefficiently. I was wasting a lot of money, I was wasting a lot of resources, and I was wasting a lot of time. I remember kind of sleeping just about 6-7 hours a day, and working with Cultivate Waste throughout the day, and just going home getting really burnt out. So I opened up to a lot of the mentors I've met throughout the years while doing volunteering, as well as the people I've met while doing Cultivate Waste and along the way. And I sought their advice, I sought their professional services. So a lot of them were lawyers and accountants to help me figure out a lot of the structure on how to manage the organization. But also, I also immediately figured out that I needed a team around me. I knew that, I just immediately knew that some of the tasks is not me, one of which was kind of collecting the waste. So I was really slow at it, and I was probably spending 4 hours a day just to kind of like go through everyone. And then I had one of my friends fill in for me for the day, and he did it all in under an hour. And I was just like, oh, clearly I was doing something wrong. So what I did was immediately hire him and just basically tap him on the shoulders. Hey, do you want to be a part of my team? I'll pay you. I think you're doing such a great job. And he was happy to do it. So I was like, sweet. So that gave me another 3 hours to focus on the right things that was most suited for me. And then another thing that I was really crap at doing was doing financials. I study chemistry, so I don't do numbers really well. And when I was kind of figuring out the price point for me, figuring out the money that came in and out, I was just really bad at it, that I wasn't getting anywhere. So I asked I asked the university, the marketing department, the business department, if they had a student who was keen to kind of do stuff for free if I labeled them as a co-founder. I found someone, luckily, and he was really happy to do it for me. And then he was kind of surprised that he actually liked what I'm doing. So it was a good thing for him as well to kind of see that he actually had a passion for changing the environment when he was just studying at uni in classrooms and stuff like that. And the next thing is to always measure everything. It's a tedious job that a lot of people undervalue so much. I can't stress out enough how important it is to take all the measurements that is there for you for the taking. Measurements like for Cultivate Waste, for example, the amount of hours we were putting into the organization, the amount of waste that we were diverting, the customers that we were getting, and how fast are we getting customers. It's little things like that are really important. And the reason being is there's always a time that comes when you're doing business that you have to present or file a report to say you board advisors, or perhaps you're applying for a funding and grant to kind of get you through some tough months. And the one thing that they really look at are those measurements. Yes, you might be doing something good. You can spin a really good yarn about, hey, I'm diverting waste, look, we're helping the community. But if you can't provide numbers, they actually don't take you seriously, because what that doesn't show is basically that you haven't really done the work right. So just measure everything right when you start, and kind of just throughout the whole process. And then the last thing is that celebrate small victories. So when you do entrepreneurship, you start with a kind of really high enthusiasm and really high passion. And then immediately you start to realize, wow, this is so hard. I just want to give up. And then you start feeling it. You start, oh, look, actually it's not that bad. But really, you're just getting used to it. And then what you, naturally as a business, you aspire to have a really good growth. But it's not that simple. And along the way, you'll stumble into some wall and kind of figure out some challenges. But also at the same time, there's going to be some small victories. And it's really important that you celebrate those. So for me, I remember one time I just really needed to get a contact email or a phone number for one particular person. And it took me like, I don't know, a couple of weeks to do that. And when I finally got it, I was just like straight to my room, close the door, and scream to myself like, yes, I did it, like so happy. So I sent an email out and then told my teammates about it, like, cool guys, we finally got it, got his email. She got for a drink. So that was just, there was such a kind of just a really good moment, and kind of that really helped into kind of keeping the morale of the team to keep going forward. Because if you're not going to motivate yourself, like who will, right? Like it has to be you. And you have to do that for everyone around you as well. Cool. And then the next thing is that there's no straight path to success. So I've never met an entrepreneur who succeeded on the first try. I think if unless you're a really naturally born genius, then you might be able to do it. But like it's always been a lot of twists and turns along the way, and it's a crazy journey, and you grow so much doing it. But yeah, it can drive someone insane. Really, like I wouldn't recommend doing it if you don't have a good support around you, because I've seen a lot of people just get really depressed doing it. Because when you do entrepreneurship, I think like if you start any project, really, other people will say no to you at first, just because I don't know, it's just so easy to say no rather than to say yes for some people, especially people who has the resources that you need. CAF City Council back in Christchurch. Yeah, and I think one really good quote that summarizes that is that Thomas Edison, he said something about, I haven't failed, I've only found 10 ways that a light bulb won't work. So that was really cool. So I think that's really good, like when you think about it that way. Yeah. And then the last thing I've kind of learned, and this is kind of how I realized that it was time for me to step out of Cultivate Waste, is know when to pivot or change. Pivot is is when you kind of change what you're doing and kind of give yourself, realize that actually what I'm doing is not as kind of, it's not working for me and not working for the people around me. And when I was doing Cultivate Waste, I realized that when I had a meeting with the urban farm that I was working with, Cultivate Christchurch, and we had very different vision into how we wanted to take Cultivate Waste forward. And if I continued working with them, it probably would have ended really badly. Probably not financially, but around the relationships that was there. We probably would have ended up not being friends anymore. I probably would have hurt the customers that we had, as well as kind of the people. I probably disappoint a lot of people as well. And basically it all came down to, I wanted to create Cultivate Waste as a business, right? I was running it as a business, and Cultivate Christchurch was kind of, they wanted to go a more non-for-profit way. And right from the start, because I had the experience of doing non-for-profits, and basically what I've said before, that it can be physically and mentally draining doing a non-for-profit, I just immediately said that, look, if this is how we're going to go forward, I think I'll probably not going to fit into your organization any longer. I'm happy to step out so you guys can, move forward without any restrictions. So, and that was it was a really tough thing for me to do, because it was almost like my baby. Like, I didn't want to let go of it, but I think that was the best thing to do. And a lot of my mentors validated me around it, saying that was really mature of you to do that, and I don't think a lot of people will be able to make that call. And I always kind of think back that I think my experience in community engagement really gave me the strength to do it, because I've seen a lot of people do that in my lifetime. So it's pretty cool. So that's pretty much my my learnings, really, and I kind of just want to quickly talk about what I do now, just so you guys don't wonder why I've still got Vodafone on my slides. So I work at Vodafone Zone. So Vodafone Zone is Vodafone's incubator and innovation program for startups around New Zealand. It's based in Christchurch, and we pretty much help startup businesses in New Zealand to kind of grow faster and kind of take on the world. So as a big corporate, we have access to 435 million customers around the globe. And so for startups, that's a really good thing for them, because they're able to directly sell it all around the globe, what their product or service is. And we're not only focused on technology, tech-related products or service, we're actually diversifying ourselves into looking at different sectors, so agriculture, health, energy, financials, fintech, and stuff like that. And I work there as a coordinator, where I provide support to the startups that we have. I do a lot of the logistical things, and basically I only took the job because, one, it was a good environment for me to be in. It was around entrepreneurship, which is really good. And the second thing was that I was guaranteed flexibility. So like, it's a Friday today, I should be in work, but I'm able to come here. And as long as it adds for my personal and professional growth. So that was kind of the two things that I asked when I applied for the job. So yeah, and I think that's a really great place to stop for me talking. I hope I didn't bore you guys enough. And I'm happy to be contacted with either my email or Twitter account, and happy to answer any questions later as well. So thank you. Cool.